Now, as you've been hearing, because we've mentioned this a couple of times, Donald Trump has filed a £10 billion lawsuit against the BBC. He's alleging that it put false words into his mouth about January the 6th. He's suing for defamation. This comes under a Florida law. And he's seeking £5 billion on each count. He suggests the BBC may have even used AI or something to fabricate some of his statements. Let's have a listen to Mr. Trump.
In a little while, you'll be seeing I'm suing the BBC for putting words in my mouth, literally. They put words in my mouth. They had me saying things that I never said coming out. I guess they used AI or something. So we'll be bringing that lawsuit. A lot of people are asking, when are you bringing that lawsuit? Even the media can't believe that one. They actually put terrible words in my mouth having to do with January 6th that I didn't say. And the beautiful words that I said, right? The beautiful words, talking about patriotism and all of the good things that I said, they didn't say that, but they put terrible words. They actually have me speaking with words that I never said, and they got caught because I believe somebody at BBC said, this is so bad, it has to be reported. That's called fake news. So we'll be filing that suit probably this afternoon or tomorrow morning.
Well, he did say the words, just not in that order, as the phrase goes, and it was a horrendous thing for whoever. And I'd still love to get I said it earlier, I'd just love to hear the sort of finer details of how this was, how it came together. I want to know who was in the, what they call the edit suite, how many people were there, was there a meeting beforehand to come to you know, why don't we take these words and make them into a different sentence that would be more powerful? Or did somebody, and this would be such breathtaking levels of naivety that it's worth losing your job for, did somebody think it was actually OK, that it still represented pretty much? I'm told by people who saw the show, the whole programme, that it didn't jar quite as much if you watch the whole thing. But that's the point, isn't it? It's not about that, because social media and clips that are taken from programmes, it was a manufactured sentence that was constructed via the conduit of editing. And somebody somewhere must have given that the go-ahead. And somebody gave it the green light to be broadcast. And invariably with the BBC and programmes like Panorama, they send that to lawyers as well. So it doesn't, I mean, maybe the lawyer wouldn't know. The lawyer would assume, you know, it came from a complete, wouldn't have been the lawyer's position necessarily to adjudicate on the editing process, just the completed article. And probably wouldn't have occurred to many people anyone would have changed somebody's words so substantially. Let's get a word from Ian Bloom, media law consultant. Ian, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
I mean, it is a bizarre story for many different reasons. I'm intrigued just journalistically how, you know, I want to know who was there and how they came to, did somebody go, yeah, I think we got away with it, or did somebody go, oh, that sounds fine, you know, who gave it the green light? We can argue that forever. What we do know, however, that it's resulted in a lawsuit of 10 billion quid from the president. Has he got a chance of winning?
Well, good afternoon again. I wasn't in the edit suite, I'm glad to say.
Oh, that would have been a great scoop if you'd have said, yes, I was sitting at the back.
Well, I like to think that I would have been concerned at the elision, at the way that this speech was edited in such a way as to allow Donald Trump to bring this case. Has he got a case? That, you know, there's several arguments in his favour, there's several arguments against. Which do you want first, for or against?
Well, tell us the for first. Why could it look positive for the president?
These are headline points in his favour.
Okay.
First of all, the case is now going to be heard in Florida. It's his home state. It's a Republican state. It's likely to be before a judge and a jury. So that's in his favour. And that jury and the judge may not take kindly to an overseas media organisation dissing their president. The next is that there's a history of awarding eye-watering damages in US trials.
Yep.
We've seen, I think, examples in the past. Millions and millions are awarded, whereas in England, a comparable case would get tens, possibly low hundreds of thousands. They're different ballgame. The BBC, we know, have apologised for the mistake they made. There's no question that they made a serious mistake. And finally, other media companies in the States, the big ones, have recently settled for low millions of dollars in damages. So they're the points in his favour.
And the points against them. What is he up against in reality?
What he's done is file, and I read earlier today, this 33-page document, this detailed filing. The biggest problem he's got, well, there's two big problems. The first problem is jurisdiction. Although he claims that the program defames him, what he can't establish, what he hasn't established in this filing, is that anyone in the United States actually saw it.
Yeah.
Now, this is a problem. If you can't show that this program was seen by someone in Florida, why have you got a case against the BBC? And although they spend maybe 100 paragraphs claiming that the BBC is accessible, and they even, for God's sake, quote Liz Truss as someone who is an authority on this.
Wow.
It's a weak case. Second problem they've got is that he actually won the election a week after the program was put out.
True.
Where's his damages? He's claiming 5 or 10 billion, 5 billion in each limb of the claim. But where's the damage? He has, in the last year, I think, successfully concluded business ventures. There is no evidence that he suffered any financial loss whatsoever. And there's a third issue, and that is this, that there's a much tougher freedom of speech regime in the States than there is here. There's a 1964 massively important Supreme Court case which established that the bar for a successful defamation claim is you've got to show malice. Now, they assert malice, they claim it's malicious, but there's no evidence that the BBC deliberately and maliciously set out to defame Donald Trump. They made a stupid mistake. That's the case against Donald Trump.
Yeah. And am I right in saying, Ian, that you would normally in these kind of cases have to show a kind of demonstrable and tangible examples that you had either your reputation had been shattered or your finances had been shattered, some form of loss against you?
Yeah, that follows a determination as to whether there's liability. There's two aspects. First, is do they have the jurisdictional entitlement to go ahead, yes or no? If no, case is dismissed. If yes, go on to look at the merits. Did they make a mistake? Yes. Is it malicious? That's the argument.
Yeah.
And then even if it is malicious, is there any loss? That comes at the end of the process. Is there loss? Well, no one on this side of the Atlantic has been able to understand the extent, if any, of Donald Trump's loss.
Yeah.
He seems to have used the presidency as a form of lawfare against the media organizations. He makes money out of suing.
Sure.
This is a litigation tactic designed to intimidate the BBC into settling as early as possible for as much as he can get out of them.
What is also interesting, and I don't know whether this would be relevant in any sort of mitigating argument, but nobody really noticed this at the time. It didn't really come out until about a year down the line.
Absolutely true, Ian. We know that Donald Trump had people in London in October, November last year, and yet none of them raised a complaint with the BBC or anyone else. Hey, our man has been terribly defamed.
Yeah.
It didn't occur to anyone that this was an issue until the Daily Telegraph in England reported it a few weeks ago.
So finally, Ian, what is your... I mean, would you take a punt on this if I'm going to nip down to the bookmakers this evening and put a bet on Trump wins, Trump loses, BBC versus president? Who comes out victorious?
Normally in litigation, the rule of thumb is that claimants, normally win. The question here is, will he win the settlement, or will the BBC have the hold their nerve and use the best lawyers they can find in the States at huge cost to defend this and say, we're not liable. Not every mistake is defamatory. That's their mantra.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's you know, I once heard someone, when asked this sort of question, say you could toss a coin, it's more reliable.
Yeah. Or I'll try AI in the meantime, shall I, Ian? Because that seems to be the direction of travel. Listen, Ian, thank you for your time. Really appreciate that. Ian Bloom, media law consultant. I mean, there is no doubt that, I mean, in literal terms, that clip on its own defames Donald Trump, and it creates a false narrative. And again, I didn't see the programme at the time, and I thought I was quick off the mark, because as soon as this story broke a few months ago now, I thought, is it still on iPlayer? Well, of course, it was never going to be there. They're not, even the BBC aren't that stupid. And it had disappeared. So I've been on there. I'm sure someone's got a version of it somewhere, I'm sure. If you watch the whole thing, then it makes more sense, because they set out the arguments as the programme goes on, and then you see this montage, which is reflective of what they already talked about. That's kind of largely, I think, the argument. But it's not really an argument, because it still resulted in the edit. I mean, I just, you know, having sat in God knows how many recording booths and, you know, for voices and editing and God knows what, for so many years, and knowing how you know, when you're editing an interview, and I've sat there as the presenter, and there's a producer or an editor going, you say, well, we'll lose that bit because he says a better line afterwards, so you can do that kind of stuff. The idea that you would kind of flip around the words so that they made a complete sentence, but were said, in the case of Trump, an hour apart, almost. I mean, I can't imagine. I just seriously cannot imagine any point where you would do that. And even if you did, one person at the very least would go, I don't think that's right, mate. And because it's Panorama didn't make the programme, as I understand it, but the BBC did edit it. Someone somewhere, there'd be more than one person there, somebody somewhere would have, you know, I would have thought flagged it. I think somebody did suggest it. Where did it go next? How many people did it go to? And were those people, or if those people were not aware of that, they might not have checked that bit, because the last thing in the world they would have thought would be that a Panorama editor would have done that. But an editor would have probably done it under the direction of a director or a producer. So there's definitely a story there to come out, and that to me is fascinating, partly because I do this for a living. It doesn't let anybody off the hook, by the way. And if this was a chronic act of naivety, and they genuinely thought they were doing nothing wrong because it was still representative of what was said, then you really have no place in my industry. You should not be working in radio or television if you thought that was acceptable. And of course, we live in a world where people do take sound bites from programmes like they've never done before. And that was the classic soundbite from the programme.